Okay, picture this. It is December. It is 1983. We are in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania.
Right.
The air is that biting, bitter cold that, cuts right through your coat, the kind that usually sends people scurrying for hot cocoa and a warm fire.
Mm-hmm. Not a day you want to be standing outside.
But not today. Today, the parking lot of the Zayre department store looks less like a holiday shopping center and more like, I don't know, a staging ground for a medieval siege.
It's a scene that completely betrays the soundtrack, isn't it? You've got Silent Night, maybe some Bing Crosby playing over the PA system.
Yeah, exactly.
But on the ground, on the actual sales floor, you have absolute chaotic violence.
We are not talking about a few people pushing and shoving to get a sale item. This is something else entirely. We are talking about a crowd so dense, so desperate, that the store manager has literally armed himself with a baseball bat.
Just to defend the stockroom door.
Just to defend the stockroom door. We're talking about broken bones, trampled grandmothers, and a level of feral aggression that suggests, the total collapse of civilization.
But it wasn't the end of the world.
No, it was the launch of the Cabbage Patch Kids.
The Cabbage Patch Kids. A 16-inch soft sculptured doll with a vinyl head, yarn hair, and a face that, well, only a mother could love.
And that was precisely the point, wasn't it?
It was the entire point.
That is what we are diving into today, the madness of 1983. But we're going to look past the nostalgia of, oh, I had the one with the pigtails.
Right.
We need to understand the machinery behind this mania, because when you actually dig into the sources, and we have a massive stack today. I mean, everything from investigative pieces and Snopes and encyclopedia.com.
All the way to an incredibly dense legal analysis from the Transnational Lawyer Journal.
Exactly. You realize this was not just a toy fad.
No, it was a perfect storm. It was a masterclass in artificial scarcity, a psychological experiment in rebranding purchasing as adoption, and, as we'll see later, a battleground for international trade law.
Battle that went all the way to the Supreme Court.
It really did.
And a story of potential art theft that is actually, it's genuinely heartbreaking when you get into the details.
It is.
So our mission today is to dissect this bizarre ecosystem. We're going to look at the riots, the ripoffs, the gray market legal battles, and the truly dark underbelly of the must-have toy.
It really is a case study in how consumerism can just go completely off the rails. It touches on everything. Intellectual property, mass psychology, and, the very specific weirdness of the 1980s.
So let's unpack this. We have to start with the product itself, the anatomy of a mania.
Yeah.
Because looking back at these dolls, they're an odd choice for a frenzy, weren't they?
They really were. Before 1983, the doll market was dominated by a very, very specific aesthetic.
Right, Barbie.
You had Barbie. Barbie was the gold standard. She was plastic, she was perfect, she was aspirational.
She was everything a little girl was supposed to want to grow up to be.
Exactly. Or you had the traditional baby dolls, which were also usually idealized, perfect symmetrical faces, rosebud lips, that sort of thing.
And then comes the Cabbage Patch Kid. It's lumpy. It's squishy.
The eyes are a little too close together.
Yeah. Some of them were bald. Some of them had these snaggletooth grins.
They were, objectively homely. But that homeliness was the genius. It was a rejection of the plastic perfection of the 70s. These dolls looked vulnerable.
They look like they needed you.
They look like they needed you. And that brings us to the single most important innovation of this entire phenomenon. It was not the doll itself. It was the verb.
The verb.
Verb to adopt.
Yeah.
You didn't buy a Cabbage Patch Kid. You adopted one.
That distinction seems so subtle, but it changed absolutely everything. I remember this vividly. You didn't just get a box with a toy in it.
No.
You got paperwork.
You got paperwork. It was a total immersive experience. And this wasn't just like a tag on the box. The entire brand identity was built around the fiction of Babyland General Hospital in Cleveland, Georgia.
Right.
This place wasn't a factory. It was a surrealist performance art piece masquerading as a retail outlet.
Describe the scene there, because the sources paint a picture that is almost cult-like.
It was incredibly committed to the bit. The staff didn't wear retail polos. They wore nurse uniforms and doctor scrubs.
Really?
Oh, yeah. The dolls weren't manufactured. They were born. They had a magic crystal tree and, of course, the Cabbage Patch itself. When a doll was ready to be sold, they would make an announcement over the PA system.
An announcement?
Alerting the nurses that a mother cabbage was going into labor.
Wait, hold on. They simulated a cabbage birth.
Fully. A nurse would check the cabbage, which was made of fabric and plaster. They'd administer amoxicillin with a big needle.
Oh, my God.
And then they would pull the doll out. They would announce the gender and the name right there for everyone to hear.
It sounds horrifying and amazing at the same time.
It created an immediate, intense emotional bond.
Yeah.
And then came the oath. This is the part that really hooked the kids and, more importantly, the parents. To leave with the doll, you had to raise your right hand and swear an oath to be a good parent. You had to promise to love it, care for it.
And you had to sign the birth certificate.
You had to sign it.
Yeah.
Which effectively reframed the entire transaction.
Because if you buy a G.I. Joe, you own a soldier. If you break it, you buy another one.
Right. It's disposable.
But if you adopt a Cabbage Patch Kid and you sign the paper, you are now responsible for it. It's a living thing in the mind of the consumer.
Exactly. It shifted the psychology from acquisition to guardianship.
Yeah.
And that emotional hook is what completely broke the supply chain. When Coloco mass marketed these in 1983, they were not prepared for how effective that adoption hook would be.
Let's talk about the numbers, because broken feels like an understatement.
In the first 9 months of 1983, they sold $6 million.
$6 million, and that still wasn't enough.
Nowhere near enough. The demand was exponential. They could not manufacture them fast enough. And this created the scarcity engine. Because you couldn't just walk in and get one,
Yeah.
the doll became a status symbol. If you had a Cabbage Patch Kid, you had won. You had accomplished the impossible.
And naturally, where there is scarcity, there are scalpers.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The economics of 1983 were wild. The retail price for a Cabbage Patch Kid was around $25.
Which, adjusted for inflation, is what, about $75 today?
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah.
So a bit pricey for a doll, but doable for a Christmas gift.
But you couldn't find them for $25.
No chance. On the gray market or the black market, we're talking newspaper classifieds, people selling out of the trunks of their cars, the price hit $2,000.
$2,000 in 1983 money.
In 1983 money, yes.
Yeah.
People were trading the equivalent of a decent used car for a stuffed doll.
That's just, I can't even wrap my head around that level of desperation.
Well, the desperation was palpable. There's a specific anecdote from one of the sources, I think it's Snopes, about a postman from Kansas City. He had promised his daughter a doll for Christmas. He couldn't find one anywhere in the Midwest. I mean, he tried everywhere. So what does he do?
Please don't tell me he trampled someone for it.
No, something far more drastic. He bought a plane ticket. He flew to London.
He flew to London for a doll.
To London. Because the mania hadn't fully saturated the UK market yet. The stock levels were better over there.
So it's just calmer in the UK.
For a time, yes. The US was the epicenter of the chaos. So he flew across the Atlantic, bought a doll, and flew back.
And that was probably cheaper than buying one from a scalper in Kansas.
It was cheaper and more reliable. That is the definition of dedication.
Or madness. It's a fine line.
It blurs the line, doesn't it?
Uh,
And that brings us right back to the violence. The Cabbage Patch riots weren't just a media exaggeration.
we mentioned the baseball bat in Wilkes-Barre, but that wasn't an isolated incident.
No, there were incidents all over the country. In Charleston, West Virginia, 5,000 people stormed a department store that only had $120 in stock.
5,000 against 120.
The math guarantees a riot. It's a mathematical certainty at that point.
It's terrifying. It's essentially a localized collapse of social order over a toy.
And this behavior left a huge mark on pop culture. You ever watch Seinfeld?
Of course.
Specifically the Festivus episode.
The Festivus for the rest of us, yeah.
Well, there is a very strong theory, and the timeline supports it, that the origin of Festivus in the show is directly inspired by the Cabbage Patch riots. Remember Frank Costanza's story?
He went to buy a doll for George.
Right. He says, I went to the store to buy a doll for my son. I reached for the last one they had, but so did another man.
And then,
As I rained blows upon him, I realized there had to be another way.
as I rained blows upon him, that is the Cabbage Patch experience in a nutshell.
It fits perfectly. Now, George would have been too old for a doll in 1983, but the writers were clearly tapping into that collective memory of parental violence in the toy aisle.
But the hysteria didn't just make people violent, it also made them incredibly gullible. We have to discuss the Milwaukee prank.
Oh, this is one of those stories that makes you cringe and laugh at the same time.
It's just perfect.
So, imagine the scene. It's Milwaukee, it's freezing cold. A radio DJ, who is clearly enjoying the chaos a little too much.
A little too much, yeah.
He announces that a B-29 bomber is going to do a flyover of Milwaukee County Stadium.
A World War II bomber.
A World War II bomber, yes.
Yeah.
And he claims this bomber is going to drop 2,000 Cabbage Patch Kids from the cargo bay.
Just stop and think about the physics of that for a second. If you drop a vinyl-headed doll from a bomber,
It's a projectile.
it's a weapon. It's not a gift. It's an airstrike.
Logic had left the building long, long ago. The report says about 24 people actually showed up. They stood in the freezing cold at the stadium.
And they brought equipment. This is the best part.
They brought catcher's mitts. They were standing there, looking up at the sky, ready to catch a falling doll.
But the detail that really sears this into my brain
The credit cards.
is that some of them were holding up their American Express cards
To the sky.
to the empty sky as if the pilot was going to swoop down with a credit card machine.
Or maybe they were just signaling, I have money. Choose me. I am worthy.
That image freezing people offering their credit cards to the heavens is the ultimate satire of 1980s consumerism. It's almost religious.
It is. A prayer to the god of commerce.
And it's funny now, but it shows just how deeply this marketing hook had sunk into the public consciousness.
It really does. But here is where we have to pivot. Because behind the adoption gimmick, behind the riots, and behind the Babyland General facade, there is a much darker, much sadder story about where this whole idea actually came from.
This is the origin story they didn't put on the box. Because every single one of those millions of dolls had a signature stamped on its left butt cheek. Xavier Roberts, the man who claimed he followed a bunny bee behind a waterfall and found the Cabbage Patch.
Right, that was the fairy tale. The reality is messier.
Yeah.
Much messier.
Xavier Roberts was an art student. He did copyright the Little People dolls in 1979, which were the precursors to the Cabbage Patch Kids.
But the concept, the soft sculpture look, the adoption papers, he didn't just pull those out of thin air.
We need to talk about Martha Nelson Thomas.
We do. Martha Nelson Thomas was an artist in Louisville, Kentucky. In the early 1970s, this is years before Robert started his business, she was creating what she called doll babies.
And these were not mass-produced toys.
No. These were art. Each one was unique. She used nylon stockings, creating these very expressive, pinched, round faces. They were soft. They were homely in that cute way we talked about.
So the aesthetic was there.
The aesthetic was there. But for Martha, the most important part wasn't the look. It was the relationship.
She didn't just sell them, did she?
She adopted them out. This is so crucial. She was terrified that her art would end up with people who didn't appreciate it or who would just stick it on a shelf. So she created a vetting process.
You had to apply.
You had to apply. You had to promise to care for the baby. She would send letters from the doll. She wanted them to be loved.
So the entire adoption framework, the paperwork, the oath, the emotional bond, that was her authentic artistic process.
It was her soul. It was how she connected her art to the world. It was the whole point of the creation.
So how did Roberts get it?
Well, the sources say they met at a craft fair in 1976. Roberts was fascinated by her dolls. He saw the appeal immediately.
And he started selling them.
He asked her to supply him with dolls so he could sell them at a gift shop at a state park in Georgia where he worked.
So initially, it was a partnership.
A very loose one.
Yeah.
But Martha eventually found out that he was selling them at a huge markup. And more importantly to her, he wasn't doing the vetting. He was just selling them as inventory.
He stripped the soul out of it.
He stripped the soul out of it. She was horrified. She felt he was corrupting the work. So she cut him off, stopped selling to him.
And Roberts didn't take that well.
Allegedly, he told her, if you won't sell me yours, I'll make my own. And he did. He took the soft sculpture aesthetic, the nylon face, the yarn hair, and he took the adoption papers concept.
He industrialized her art.
Perfectly put. He industrialized her art.
That feels like such a profound violation. I mean, it's one thing to copy a design. It's another thing entirely to copy the spirit of the art, the adoption process, and turn it into a marketing gimmick.
It's the difference between imitation and appropriation. Martha sued him in 1975. But you have to remember, intellectual property law regarding style or feel is incredibly difficult to litigate.
It's so murky.
It's so murky. You can copyright a specific character, like Mickey Mouse, but can you copyright a doll that looks like a baby and comes with a paper? It was a legal quagmire.
And Roberts had the money.
By this point, he had infinite money. He could outspend her, outlawyer her. The case dragged on for 10 years. It wasn't settled until 1985.
By 1985, the craze had already peaked. He had made his hundreds of millions.
Exactly. They settled out of court for an undisclosed sum. But reading about Martha, you get the sense it really wasn't about the money for her.
No.
She felt her children had been stolen and turned into monsters. She hated the commercialism. She hated the riots. The idea that people were fighting with baseball bats over a mass-produced version of her doll babies was the antithesis of everything she stood for.
It's the classic tragedy of the creator versus the commercializer. Roberts understood scale. He understood that if you take the heart of the art and package it, you can sell it to the world.
And Martha wanted the heart to remain authentic, which by definition can't be scaled.
And in the 1980s, scale won. Xavier got his name on the butt of every doll, and Martha Nelson Thomas was largely forgotten until much later.
A really sad footnote to a billion-dollar story.
Well, speaking of the dark side of the 80s, we have to move on, because when a product becomes this ubiquitous, this quickly, it triggers something in the cultural subconscious. It breeds urban legends.
The folklore surrounding Cabbage Patch Kids is almost as fascinating as the legal battles. It shows a society trying to process why these weird, ugly dolls were taking over.
I was reading the Snopes deep dive on this, and the rumors were just wild. Let's start with the mutant theory.
Oh, this is a great one. The rumor was that the dolls were designed by the government, specifically the CIA or some shadowy agency, to desensitize the American public to the appearance of mutated children.
Because of nuclear war?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have to remember the context. It's 1983. The movie The Day After, which depicted a nuclear holocaust in Kansas, aired on TV and traumatized an entire generation.
Yeah.
Tensions with the Soviet Union were sky high. Nuclear anxiety was the background radiation of daily life.
So people see these lumpy, strange-looking dolls everywhere, and their brains go, this is preparation. They want us to get used to the mutants before they arrive.
It sounds absurd now, but it speaks to what folklorist Barbara Mickelson calls disquiet. The dolls were too popular, they were too weird. There had to be a sinister reason for their existence. It couldn't just be a fad.
Which also led to darker rumors. The satanic connection.
Inevitable in the 80s. If it's popular, it's satanic. Dungeons and Dragons, heavy metal, Cabbage Patch Kids.
Of course.
The National Enquirer ran stories claiming the dolls were possessed. There were rumors that if you left them alone, they would move or strangle you in your sleep.
Which feeds directly into the death certificate myth.
Right. There was a persistent playground rumor that if your doll broke and you sent it back to the factory, they wouldn't fix it. They would send you a death certificate.
Which was totally false.
Completely false.
Yeah.
Uniqlo would never do that. It's terrible for business. But the fact that kids believed it shows how effective the "it's alive" marketing was. If it can be born, it can die.
The logic is sound, in a way.
It is. But the irony is there was a version of the doll that was actually dangerous.
Yeah.
This is where the horror stories became real. We have to talk about the Snack Time Kids.
This is where the urban legend becomes a product recall.
Right. This was later, in 1996, when Mattel had the license. They released the Cabbage Patch Snack Time Kids.
The concept was simple enough. The
Yeah.
doll eats.
It had a motorized mouth, a set of mechanical rollers. You'd feed it a plastic carrot, and the rollers would pull the carrot in, giving the illusion of chewing, and it would drop into a backpack.
The problem was the doll didn't know what was a carrot and what wasn't.
It had no sensors. It had no off switch. It was just a high-torque motor designed to pull things into a dark cavity, indiscriminately.
And kids have hair.
Long hair. That was the disaster scenario. A child would lean in to hug their baby, their hair would get caught in the rollers, and the doll would just keep eating.
Yeah.
It would chew the hair right up to the scalp.
That is viscerally horrifying. You're trapped, attached to a doll that is mechanically chewing your hair, and you can't turn it off.
There were dozens of reports, and reports of it catching fingers, too. It was a complete PR nightmare.
So they were banned.
Banned and recalled immediately. But it stands as a rare example where the killer doll trope, you know, Chucky and all that, actually had a basis in reality. It was a machine that wouldn't stop eating you.
Unbelievable. So we have the mutant conspiracy, the stolen art tragedy, and the literal cannibal doll. But now I want to pivot to the section of the outline that I found the most surprising, the legal battle.
Right.
And I don't mean the Martha Nelson Thomas lawsuit. I mean the battle over the gray market.
This is the meaty stuff. This is the case. Original Appalachian Artworks, Inc. v. Granada Electronics, Inc. And while it sounds incredibly dry, it is actually a masterclass in how companies use petty details to control global trade.
Okay, so set the stage for us. It's the mid-'80s. The mania is in full swing. You can't find a doll in the U.S. to save your life.
Not for love nor money.
But in Spain, there are plenty.
Correct. Xavier Roberts' company, OAA, had licensed a Spanish company called Jesmar to manufacture Cabbage Patch Kids for the European market, Spain, the Canary Islands, and so on.
And we need to be crystal clear here. These were real dolls. They were authentic.
100% authentic. They used the same molds, the same materials, the same specs. If you put a Jesmar doll next to a Calico doll made for the U.S. market, they were physically identical.
So enter Granada Electronics. They're a U.S. distributor. They see a massive opportunity.
An arbitrage
They
opportunity.
buy the dolls legally in Spain, ship them to New York, and sell them to desperate American parents.
This is called the gray market. It's not the black market. These aren't stolen or counterfeit. It's just buying a legitimate product in one region and selling it in another.
And normally this is perfectly legal. It's called the exhaustion doctrine, right? Or first sale doctrine.
First sale doctrine, yes. The idea is that once a manufacturer sells an item, their rights to control that specific item are exhausted.
They've made their money.
They've been paid. If I buy a Ford in Canada, it's my car. I can drive it to the U.S. and sell it. Ford can't stop me.
So OAA, Roberts' company, sues Granada. They say, you can't sell those here. But how do they get around the first sale doctrine? The dolls are genuine.
They use trademark law, specifically the Lanham Act. The goal of trademark law is to prevent consumer confusion. You don't want someone buying a Coke and getting brown sludge. You need to guarantee the brand promise.
But these were Cabbage Patch Kids. They weren't sludge.
Physically, yes. But OAA argued that the product wasn't just the doll. The product was the adoption experience. And this is where they weaponized the paperwork.
The Spanish birth certificates?
Exactly. The Jesmar dolls came with adoption papers and birth certificates printed in Spanish. Certificado de Nacimiento.
And OAA argued that this was a material difference.
They did, and the court agreed. OAA argued that American consumers were confused and disappointed when they opened the box and found Spanish papers. They couldn't read the oath, they couldn't fill out the form. It damaged the brand.
Okay, but it gets even pettier than that. The fulfillment houses.
This is the kicker. This is the cynical genius of their legal strategy. Remember, you were supposed to mail these papers to Babyland General in Georgia to get your official stamped card back in the mail.
Right, to complete the adoption.
Well, the computer system in Georgia was set up by OAA to reject the serial numbers from the Spanish-made dolls.
So they created the problem themselves.
They engineered the rejection. When a parent sent in the Jesmar papers, Babyland General sent them back with a rejection letter. Sorry, this doll is not in our system.
That feels incredibly cynical. It's bureaucratic sabotage.
But legally, it was a slam dunk. The court ruled that because the gray market dolls came with papers that didn't work in the official U.S. system, they were materially different from the U.S. product.
So the difference wasn't the doll. It was the fact that the manufacturer refused to process the paperwork for the doll.
Essentially, yes. The court said that this difference, however small, damaged the goodwill of the Cabbage Patch brand. The local flavor, the English language papers, and the functioning adoption process was part of the protected trademark.
That is just wild. It basically means a company can use language barriers and their own internal bureaucratic rules to bypass the first sale doctrine and maintain a monopoly on a specific territory.
It was a massive win for trademark holders. It established that a material difference doesn't have to be physical. It can be cultural. It can be administrative. And it allowed OAA to shut down the gray market and keep their prices and their scarcity completely controlled.
They successfully argued that, in the eyes of the American consumer, a doll that comes with Spanish instructions is a defective product.
In the context of adoption, yes. If you can't adopt it, it's not a Cabbage Patch Kid, it's just a doll. And people weren't paying $2,000 for a doll, they were paying for the adoption.
That is a level of legal jujitsu that you almost have to admire, even if it feels incredibly gross.
It maintained the ecosystem, it kept the frenzy alive for a little while longer.
But frenzies don't last forever. Which brings us to Section 5, the decline, and more importantly, the parody. Because nothing screams you've made it like getting savagely parodied.
The Cabbage Patch Kids.
I was obsessed with these. Topps released them in 1985. They were trading cards that looked just enough like Cabbage Patch Kids, but wrong.
So wrong. They were grotesque. You had Atom Bomb with a mushroom cloud coming out of his head, Leaky Lindsay with a faucet for a nose.
They were wonderful. They were the perfect antidote to the saccharine sweetness of the Cabbage Patch.
It was punk rock for second graders.
It really was. And naturally, Xavier Roberts sued them.
Well, of course he did.
He sued Topps for copyright infringement. And I just want you to take a moment and appreciate the sheer irony here.
Please.
The man who borrowed, let's use that term loosely, the soft sculpture design and the entire adoption concept from Martha Nelson Thomas,
Right.
was now suing someone for parodying his idea.
It's rich. It's so rich you can't copy the thing I copied.
What was the result of that?
Topps eventually settled. They agreed to change the design of the characters, make the arms stiffer, changed the faces slightly, just enough to avoid direct infringement. But the cultural damage was done. The Garbage Pail Kids had exposed the absurdity of the original product.
And the market followed. The crash of the Cabbage Patch Kid was just as spectacular as its rise.
It's the nature of the fad curve. It's a sharp peak and a steep drop. In 1985, Coloco hit their peak sales, $600 million.
$600 million. They were on top of the world.
And then,
3 years later.
by 1988, Coloco filed for bankruptcy.
That is just astonishing. 3 years from ruling the entire toy industry to Chapter 11. What happened?
Market saturation was total. Everyone who wanted one had one. The scarcity vanished overnight. And once you could walk into a store and just buy one off the shelf.
Nobody wanted them anymore.
Nobody wanted them. The hunt was over. The adoption felt less special when the orphanage was overflowing and they were on the clearance rack.
And the license just bounced around after that, didn't it?
Oh, it went everywhere. It was like a hot potato. Hasbro took it, then Mattel, who gave us the Snack Time Kids, then Toys R Us had it for a bit, Play Along, Jakks Pacific, wicked cool toys.
Wow.
The brand never died. You can still buy them today. But it never, ever regained that 1983 magic.
You can't recreate a riot.
No. That requires a very specific set of circumstances that you only get once in a generation.
So let's bring this deep dive home. What does all of this mean? We've looked at the riots, the stolen art, the Spanish lawsuits, the hair-eating robots.
I think the Cabbage Patch Kid phenomenon was a turning point in consumer history. I really do. It was the moment we moved from buying things to buying feelings.
The adoption gimmick.
Exactly. We weren't buying a pile of fabric and vinyl. We were buying the feeling of being a parent, of saving a child from a cabbage patch. That emotional manipulation is what allowed Roberts to steamroll Martha Nelson Thomas.
It's what drove people to trample each other in Zaire.
And it's what allowed lawyers to argue that a Spanish birth certificate was a fatal flaw in a product. It was all about protecting the feeling, not the object.
It proved that if you can make the customer feel responsible for the product, you own them.
And it highlighted the dark side of the toy industry. It showed that underneath the peace and love branding, there are baseball bats, lawsuits, and a ruthless protection of intellectual property, however it was acquired.
And that leads us to our final thought for you, the listener. Because it's so easy to look back at 1983 and laugh.
We look at those photos of people in Milwaukee holding their credit cards up to a bomber that wasn't there, and we think, wow, people were silly back then.
But are we? Have we really changed?
Look at the digital landscape today. Just look at NFTs, look at limited edition skins in video games.
We are still adopting unique assets. We're still getting certificates of authenticity.
We are paying thousands, sometimes millions of dollars for digital images of monkeys or pixelated punks based entirely on artificial scarcity and a digital certificate of authenticity on the blockchain.
The medium has changed. It's not yarn and vinyl anymore, it's code. But the psychology.
The psychology hasn't changed a bit. We are still desperate to own the it thing. We are still willing to pay 100 times the value for the feeling of exclusivity and ownership.
We just traded the department store riot for the gas war on Ethereum.
Exactly. It's the same behavior, different arena.
So the next time you feel that panic, that FOMO rising up because you have to have the latest drop, just remember the Cabbage Patch riots, remember the baseball bats, and maybe, just maybe, take a deep breath.
And always check the adoption papers.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. Keep digging.
Keep digging.